Hey friends, welcome back to the Gubba Homestead. I'm Gubba, and specifically welcome back to the barn where we are going to be having a chat about 5 things I wish I knew before I got goats. If you didn't know, I have Nigerian dwarf goats here on the homestead. I started out with a dairy cow, realized a dairy cow was not working for me and my situation. Would love to have one again down the road, but then I got goats and they are absolutely perfect, but they do have a learning curve, and these are some of the things that I wish I would have known before hopping into the world of goats. We are also in my barn today, which has a very special place in my heart because this is where I used to milk my cow, where I built my first ever stanchion when I moved to the homestead, and really got into dairy animals. The reason we're in the barn is because it is a bright, beautiful, sunshiny day, but because it has been overcast for like the past 4 or 5 months, my eyes are adjusting back to the sun, and the ground is completely covered with snow. So the sun is reflecting onto the snow and it is very bright. So in order for me to actually be able to see and talk to you, we have to be somewhere that is a little shaded. Behind me is the stanchion that I built for my Jersey dairy cow, Moo, who was absolutely amazing. She was a dream. She birthed twins here on the homestead, twin girls. It was such a surreal experience, and along with that was a huge learning curve. I realized that a dairy cow at this moment is not suitable for my homestead. She was giving me 5 to 6 gallons a day. She was an incredible milker, but I could not handle all of that milk. So then I thought goats, specifically my Nigerian dwarf goats, who I love so much. And I chose them because of their high fat content in their milk, and I like fat. And they have been a dream for the most part. But if you are thinking about goats, you definitely want to consider these things. First of all is goats. They are escape artists. And I'm not just saying that because that's the general rule, what everybody says. I've experienced it. They will escape. If you have loose or shoddy fencing, they will get out. They will find a way to Houdini out. And even I have some gates for my goats, and I had one goat in particular who learned how to nose open the gate and push the gate open. Not only that, they learned, I even have special locking latch gates, and they learned how to lift the latch, push it over, and push the gate open. So they are incredibly smart and they will escape. So think about that before getting goats, because trust me, it is not fun to come outside to escaped goats, specifically if you have males and females and you're trying to plan breeding and then the males get out when they're not supposed to and they get with the does. It's particularly not fun if you have predators and your goats are out. They get out at night when there's predators. It's just not a fun situation. Make sure you have secure fencing before you even think about getting into goats. I did consider netted electric fencing, but after reading more into goats because of how curious they are, that can be dangerous because they can tangle themselves up in the netting. The best advice I ever got is hog paneling with T-posts. So the hog paneling has smaller panels compared to the cattle panel that has larger panels that they will put their heads through. And so that will keep them from getting stuck, especially if they have their horns. You can run a line of electric on top of your fence. So if they go to maybe hop the fence, they will get a slight electric tap on their nose. So that will deter them, but solid paneling, T-posts will do the trick. If you just have field fencing that's loose, they will go under. Trust me on that one. They will escape and you will come out to your goats. This last fall, I had my male escape from his enclosure. He hasn't escaped since, but I never found out where he escaped from. He Houdini'd out of his enclosure and then ended up with one of my females who wasn't heat at the time. So I'm having goat babies earlier than I wanted. So that is exactly what I'm talking about. But I had no clue where he got out. He has not gotten out since. So just like I have those T-posts back there, build solid goat fencing. Another thing about your beloved goats is that they are notorious hay wasters. So they will just grab hay, drop it on the ground. They'll tromp through their hay. They will drag their hay out of wherever it's at. They just like to waste hay. It's just something about goats. So if you are going to have goats, trust me on this one too, plan your goat feeder ahead of time. Whether you are hanging a goat feeder inside of their enclosure, which comes with pros and cons. It's nice to have a feeder that you can put up for them to reach to, and they can't as easily waste it. But if it's inside of an enclosure, hay will still fall down and you will have to clean that out. It's not the prettiest. Or have a hay feeder ready to go. You found blueprints online, you built one, so there's a catch and you can catch the hay. That is currently on my project list. So when the goats just rip it out and just drop it, it will go into a catcher. And then because it doesn't touch the ground, they can revisit it and eat it if they want. And there's not so much wasted hay, because once they drop the hay, it hits the ground, they go to the bathroom on it, tromp around on it, they're not going to want to eat it. They want hay that is in just perfect, pristine condition, and hay is expensive. So keep that in mind with their feed and how you are going to go about feeding them. Right now, I'm in this situation because last winter I installed a feeder inside of their house and it was great. They were wasting way less hay, but the situation that I had to deal with was the hay that did fall down onto the ground. Mucking that out in the spring and summer was not ideal because they went to the bathroom on it, tromped around on it, and it got thick, mushy, and I did not love that. So I had grand elaborate plans to build hay feeders that have catchers, covers, something beautiful for the outside that they can eat and gnaw on and graze on, but I haven't gotten to it because I've been so busy. That has now been added to my spring projects list, along with getting my hydrant fixed, because if you followed along, my hydrant busted while it was really cold out. All my other hydrants were fine, so I had to haul water through the winter. I also want to install frost-free waterers for my goats so that I don't have to haul water as much next winter. So you can see how the projects start piling up. And in regards to goats, you are going to have projects. So even that thing of them wasting hay, figuring out where the best area is to feed them. And this will also depend on your climate, right? If you don't have snow, you can be more open with outdoor feeding options. But because I have more harsh weather, I have to look at feeding them indoors. So plan ahead for that. The next thing is the males, the bucks, they smell bad during the rut. So that's the season when the does are coming into heat and the bucks are going crazy and they're trying to court the does. And what they do is they urinate on themselves to make themselves smell appealing to the ladies. And to us, it is not appealing. It smells absolutely atrocious. And when I say bad, at first I didn't believe that people when they were like, man, it is one of the worst smells ever, until this last fall with my second buck, and it was bad. And even though I have the females and the males separated, that smell can permeate into the area with the females, and if you are milking, it can land its way into the milk. It can jump enclosures, and if you kept your females with your male, they would end up smelling as well. So keep that in mind. You are not, and just trust me, going to want bucks near your living area, especially during the rut, because you will quickly regret that. It is going to stink up the whole area. And if you have a sensitive nose like I do, you might find yourself getting sick a time or two when you're out there just trying to milk your goats in peace. It's not a very fun experience when you keep getting a waft of deep musk odor. I can't even describe it. It's foul. But again, that does vary from buck to buck. I had one buck who wasn't as smelly, and then now this buck is on the complete end of the other end of the spectrum of smelly. So if you are like me and want to have a self-sufficient herd and keep a buck for your herd, you need to figure out where you are going to fence and enclosure him. The girls would be fine in a backyard setting, but a buck, in my opinion, would not in a backyard setting. You want distance between where you are living your most happy and joyful, fulfilled life from wherever that buck is, because your life will not be so fulfilled and joyful if you are having to smell his musk and odor. And the next thing on the list is super crucial. You will need to deworm your goats. Goats are very susceptible to worms, all kinds of parasites, and those parasites can take over their body, overwhelm them, affect fertility, affect their health, and can result in death if you are not maintaining their parasitic load properly. I have a homestead chore video where I showed what I do for natural deworming. I don't use any pharmaceutical dewormers because I don't want that in my milk. On some of them, there is a time where you would administer and deworm them, and then you have to milk them for 7 days and toss out all the milk because you don't want to get that into your system. And I think there might be some where you don't have to do that, but I don't trust it. So I am completely natural when it comes to that. But this will vary on weather conditions. If you live in a more humid, swampy, wet area, you need to deworm them more often because that is a breeding ground for parasites and worms. Also, if your goats are not able to free range and go from pasture to pasture and you're not rotating them, that is also going to create a breeding ground for parasites because they will go to the bathroom, and in their droppings, that's where parasites are found. And then if they're eating the grass where the parasites are, so there is this cycle that you need to break, and you can break by rotating their pasture and getting them onto fresh pasture, which is what I do through the seasons for my goats, and that has been extremely beneficial. But I also keep an eye on the weather. If it's super rainy during the spring, I will deworm them more often. So when I had a dairy cow, I did not have to worry about this as much because they are not as susceptible to the parasites as goats are. And originally, when I was weighing a dairy cow versus dairy goats, that was one of my make or breaks, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to deal with that. And so I went with the dairy cow, but a dairy cow has their own things that are different from goats that you deal with. And I've come to realize it's not a big deal with maintaining the parasitic load in your goats. You just have to be on top of it and be comfortable with whatever you do. I prefer the most natural route here on the homestead just because goat milk is a huge part of my diet, and I feel more comfortable having natural herbs in my milk than some pharmaceutical mystery junk. Again, this is incredibly crucial because if their parasite load becomes too overwhelming, it can kill them because the parasites will take out their blood, it affects their digestive system, and once they reach a certain point, it's pretty hard to get them to come back. So you just have to keep an eye and know your herd. And last, but definitely not least, is goats are companion animals. If you have a lonely goat, you are going to have a very loud goat. So if you're living in close proximity to your neighbors and your goat is screaming all the time because they're lonely, they're not going to be very happy. And if your goat is screaming all the time, you are also more prone to lose your mind. Trust me on that one. I had a goat who would just scream and scream and scream, even though they weren't alone, they were fed, it was just part of their personality. They were also the ones that learned to flip the locks. They were incredibly smart. So there must have been something with the screaming. They just scream and scream and scream. So they are definitely companion animals, and they have their own personalities. Like I just mentioned, that goat was smart. He figured out all the locks and he just liked to scream. That was his thing. But especially if you get a goat, they're gonna want a friend. If they're lonely, they're just gonna scream for you. And that isn't a very welcoming or fun experience with goats. And I just have to say, I love my goats. I love them so much. They work so well on the homestead. I love that they can go free range. I love that they are friendly for the most part. I did have one goat that has developed aggression, and that came on after her having her first babies. So there was some hormonal change there, but all the rest of my goats, they are so friendly and they give the most amazing milk. I actually prefer goat milk to cow milk. With how much I talk about milk, I love goat milk, and it gets such a bad rap because everyone thinks it tastes goaty, which that goat flavor, that nasty flavor, what I was talking about, it could be because whoever you're getting it from keeps the males in too close proximity. It could also be whoever you're getting it from does not have a good diet for their goats. My goats are out free ranging. They're eating a lot of shrubs and grass, and their milk is creamy and delicious and does not have a goat flavor. The only time it did is when the male was in rut and his smell permeated through. Those are things that I wish I knew. And here is a bonus one that just popped into my mind as I was talking about my goats and their free ranging. Goats will eat everything. This is your bonus tip. This might be one of the most important ones. If you plant your fruit trees, if you plant a lilac bush, if you plant some shade trees, if you plant some beautiful shrubs, if you plant some fruit bushes, and you don't protect them and separate them from the goats, and you think, oh, the goats won't find them, they will. They will find what you do not want them to find, and they will completely destroy it. And this goes back to fencing. You need to have proper fencing. I learned this because I had planted some fruit bushes inside of my garden, and I even put up like chicken wiring on the outside, so my goats shouldn't have been able to get into it, but they smushed the chicken wiring down, stuck their head in through the fence, and destroyed my fruit bushes that were on the barrier. In hindsight, I need to plant further in so the goats cannot access what is on the other side of the fence. Even though they have all the food in front of them, they will go to a fence and put their head through and get what's on the other side of the fence. So keep that in mind. They will eat trees if they're not properly protected. They will eat your shrubs. They will literally eat everything. So you need to properly protect, and that will be by putting up your T-posts and the panels so they cannot get through. Electric fencing, they're just gonna skirt it. Field fencing, they're just gonna find a way under or topple it over. You need solid panels. You can also just not plant stuff in their enclosures if you don't want them to get at it. I hope that you have found this helpful. I would have found this helpful when I was first looking into goats, especially seeing someone so enthusiastic about them, but also realistic of things you need to be considerate of, because I love my goats. They're such an amazing part of my homestead. I don't think I will ever not have goats. I would love to get a dairy cow again one day. And I also love my Nigerian dwarf goats. I'm so partial to them. I don't know if I'd ever get another breed of goats. I say that, but maybe I think my next branch would be into sheep. We'll see, but I genuinely hope this was helpful, and I appreciate you so much for hanging out with me. You can comment and let me know if it was, and I will see you next time. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye!